We need a theme song, so could you please send me a theme song? 'Cause we don't really have a theme song, and we could really use a theme song. Send us a song. I welcome you wherever you may sit from my home that sits on Treaty 8 land, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree and Dene. This territory is home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. I thank the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who have lived in and cared for these lands for generations. Tremendously grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before us. I make this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory I reside on. Hi, everybody. It's Alyssa for a virtual variety night. This was kind of the wild card. Well, I guess not like the traditional wild card, which is usually the 5th Thursday. This one is the 2nd Thursday, so it's typically improv. However, a lot of my favorite improv peeps have been busy over the summer. And so for this Thursday, I decided, let's do something else. And I didn't know what that was going to be. So what is it going to be? Well, I'm going to let you find folks in a bit on a brainstorming session of mine. So I have been thinking a lot about kind of a lot of things that are surrounding one particular how do I want to say it? It's not really one particular story or one particular event. It's just like a thought that has tons of stories and tons of things involved in it. So I'm just going to share with you kind of what I've been thinking. So I took some notes and this might be kind of a long one. We'll see. Because there is just some places where I'm like, insert a story here to explain this point. So we'll see how long that'll be. So what I've been thinking a lot lately, what I've been thinking about a lot lately is ADHD. So I think that I have ADHD. I have never been diagnosed with it, although I am currently being treated for it. And sometimes while I'm thinking about my relationship with ADHD or my connection or my link to my feeling of like relating to a lot of when I hear people talk about some of the struggles and some of the frustrations, I kind of try and think about, okay, well, this really applies to me. This really doesn't. Or I'll think about, well, here's some good evidence that maybe this is something I'm struggling with. But then here's the counterpart. So that's sort of just how my brain works. And I'm like, well, this is why I think this. And then another piece of my brain goes, but this is kind of the counter argument to that idea. And so I thought first I would sort of take you through my evidence for and against sort of thought process. So evidence for me potentially having ADHD. When I take the adult ADHD self-assessment questionnaire, I screen positive. Now, that sounds compelling. However, I find self-administered questionnaires to be very, very difficult to trust. I feel unqualified to answer most of the questions accurately, even though they're about myself. In general, I find self-assessment anxiety-inducing. I find the world much too subjective, language too ambiguous. And I feel uneasy about assuming a definitive stance on almost anything. As I was writing that note earlier in my brainstorm about this evening, I even wrote, so I'll just read that last line again. I feel uneasy about assuming a definitive stance on almost everything. I even wanted to say that I feel uneasy about assuming a definitive stance on anything, but that felt too definitive. So I said almost anything instead. So that gives you a little bit of insight into what it's like in here. This makes multiple choice tests exceptionally difficult. I really take exception. When they're trying to like give you tips to students about how to do multiple choice tests, and they go, you can't think of it as being the right answer. You have to think about as being the best answer to the question. That boggles my mind. I overthink every single question on a multiple choice test, even really easy ones where I'm like, even sometimes when I go, I know that this is the right answer. This answer is going to get me the points, but I almost can't even write it. Sometimes I can't because of something else about this other also right answer where I understand what they're asking. This answer is either more or equally correct, even though I know it's not the one they're looking for. Anyway, it's maddening. And so maddening that when I was in university, so I graduated high school and I went immediately into university, no idea really what I wanted to study. I was interested in theater. So I thought I'd do a year of general studies, see if anything stood out to me. You had to wait until the following year, regardless, to audition for the fine arts program, I believe. And so, yeah, I said, I'll get this 1 year under my belt and then just see if I'm interested in anything. And I found a lot of the exams to be frightening, overwhelming, terrifying. And I'm a pretty good test taker. Tests actually, I usually, for a lot of people that struggle with exams, the exam will show that they have less understanding than they actually do. For me, it's often the opposite because I kind of, I find that a lot of times I do better in exams than my knowledge, than what I feel like my knowledge of the material is. If it's multiple choice. But they also drive me insane. Totally crazy. One of my favorite stories about my first year in university is I was taking a drama 101 class, and I had these two really wonderful TAs in the class, and I had learned like a technique for taking exams that I had learned at one point is to have brightly colored pens and take notes about everything that's going on in your brain, to just get it out onto paper and keep your brain really awake using, different highlighters and making notes about stuff and whatever. So that was in my high school English class that the teacher had instructed us that was, a really great way to do things. And so I was trying out that tactic and doing like a pretty low stakes quiz. I think it was like 15 questions, 20 questions maybe. And again, pretty low stakes. But I was like quite anxious about it and overthinking everything. And I was writing everything down that came into my mind as per my strategy. So at the beginning of the test, it said name. And I put Alyssa Hudson, which is my name. Then the next part said first name. No, it said last name. So name, Alyssa Hudson, last name. And I put Hudson, Alyssa. And then I wrote a note to myself beside me, like, I couldn't even get my name right on this test. I am going to do very badly. How could I even get my name wrong? Blah, 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 blah. A little freak out. then I'm like doing the test. There was a part of the test where it was like a quote from, like a quotation from a play that we had looked at that year, something about Galileo. And they used the phrase tongue in cheek in this quote. And so I had put a little note beside, like, I don't actually know what they're talking about when they say tongue in cheek. I have a very vague idea about what that means, blah, 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 blah. So that was just, these are just two instances on a whole paper full of anxiety writing. It's maybe not full of anxiety writing, but like, those were two of the most anxious examples. So when I got my test back, so this is like, a week later, and I had forgotten about my anxiety about this test, and I got the quiz back. And so I went through and whatever, and I did fine on it. But when I looked at the grade, it was like something like number of questions right, 15. Wrong name on test, -10. Pointed out some sort of spelling error, because that was another of the things that I'd circled, +10. And then also in the margins, when I had these weird anxiety questions that I was just writing out, like next to the tongue-in-cheek one, my lovely TA, like also just answered the question right there. He was just like, oh, actually, historically people would use this so that people would know that they were joking. It was like the old-timey version of a sarcasm font was, to say something with your tongue physically in your cheek so that people would know that you were kidding. I guess before the tone of yeah, right, came about or something. Anyway, I really, really enjoyed that that TA. But that was what it was like taking a multiple choice test for me. My brain just wouldn't get out of the way. I've written myself another note for a story to tell you here about how much anxiety I get when I need to self-assess. So I went to go get some glasses, and it was my first time at this clinic. I had gone in for my eye exam. Everything was fine. It was lovely. I ordered some glasses. As was suggested to me by my optometrist, I had decided to order glasses with a boost, is what they had called it, at the bottom part of the lens to help with reading. So I am incredibly nearsighted. I've never really had any trouble seeing words up close, but based on their tests or whatever, they're like, yeah, you might just stand to have a little bit of a boost there. So it's like, there's like bifocals and there's progressives. This is like a step back from progressives, where it's just like this little thing just for reading. So also at the time, I was having really bad problems with headaches, chronic headaches that were quite frequent. And so I was just like, I don't want to like cheap out on these glasses. I want to get ones that are good for working on the computer and good for, with the blue light protection and transitionals to sunglasses to protect my eyes more and all that kind of stuff. I just was like, I don't want to cheap out on these. I'll spend the money and just get something good so that I can try and tackle this headache problem without putting myself further behind. So, so then I went and I picked up the glasses, and they had told me, they're like, it takes a little getting used to. So, give it some time to get used to it. So I did, and I just was not feeling great in these glasses. I felt like I couldn't really see properly, especially at like mid thing. I would often like startle myself seeing like the different magnification in the bottom part of the lens, which I figured I would just get used to. I started getting really bad migraines, and that was worse. And so I just wasn't really liking them. So after a number of weeks, I think you have 30 days at this particular place to bring glasses back if they're not working for you. And I think I was like right almost there, because I hate returning things. But anyway, they were expensive, so I did. And I went in and I talked to them, and I sat with a technician, and she was talking to me, and it was as soon as, and she was lovely, lovely, could not be trying to be more helpful, like just great. But there was a certain point where she asked me to describe my vision and kind of the problem I was having. And to try and put that into words when I was already in an uncomfortable situation, because it makes me uncomfortable to return things, I was starting to get kind of emotional. Like I was not feeling emotional, but I was looking emotional. Like I was sounding like I was about to burst into tears. I was about to burst into tears, but just not, again, because of, it wasn't tied to an emotion. It was tied to this feeling of thinking I was going to be wrong, whatever I said about my self assessment of my eyes. So I said, uh, I made it through, like white knuckling it. I don't think I actually had cried. Maybe I did. I don't remember. But anyway, she said, okay, we should get you in with the optometrist. Unfortunately, she's not here today. Let's book you in to see her so that we can see if these are working for you. And basically, what I really wanted was for somebody to test my eyes with the glasses on and just see if they were working as well as they were supposed to, because they were feeling so weird. So then I go in for the next time. Somebody does a little eye test on me. I go see another technician who put some lenses in front of my eyes and said, okay, no, first I had to put on my glasses, and she said, okay, just kind of look out and just describe your vision, which in my opinion was a really vague question. So I was already like flashing back to crying in the thing before, and was starting to get a little like where I just sound like I'm crying. So I was already a little upset, so I couldn't even talk or I would start crying. And so she kind of answered for me. I was like, and she's like you can see, but it's not sharp, or it's clear, but it's not sharp, something like that. I was like, yeah, sure. Okay. So then she puts different things and says, is this better or is this better? This makes me very anxious. Because I'm so worried I'm wrong each time. Like I just, my visual memory is very, very short. So if you show me something and then show me something else and then show me it again, unless it's a really drastic difference, I don't remember the difference. I've learned some techniques to kind of like figure that out, but like it's really hard for me. And so when I was already feeling kind of vulnerable, that was like not doing any better. But again, this is a different woman than the one that I'd spoken to before. And again, she was totally lovely, just trying so hard to help me. Very kind, listening. Like, you know, she could tell that I was upset, and I'm sure it was baffling to her why I was upset, because she was being just delightful. I tried to let her know, like, this is just an anxiety reaction. This is not anything that, you know, you're great. But it's uncomfortable, but she made it as comfortable as a person could. Okay. So then she goes, okay, so now you're going to wait for the doctor to sit on this chair, which is in the middle of the glasses store. Please go sit on this chair. And that was fine. So I went to go sit there, and I'm like, I hadn't cried yet, but I was barely holding it together. And I'm trying to breathe, not too deeply so that I start crying, but not like shallow so that I start crying. And it was like trying to find the right balance, and like try really hard to push all the anger at myself for being such a disaster out of my mind so that it doesn't make me more upset. It was just whatever. So then the lady that I had spoken to the first time, who was lovely, she was helping somebody else. That's why I had this other lady that was helping me. So that woman is helping somebody else. She gets up to go to the back to get something for this other customer. As she passes by me, she reaches over and squeezes my arm, very caring, very kind, and says, "You okay, hon?" And my reaction was to go, kind of almost in a rude way. And then I immediately burst into sobbing tears. So it's just like, you okay, hon? Like just sobbing. So I feel silly, kind of ridiculous, and I'm unable to control that. And so this woman feels awful that now I'm even crying harder, and she's just being lovely. Then I see that the customer that she had been helping in the store comes over to me, stands next to me, and says, "May I sit next to you?" Now, this is during COVID time, so the chairs are relatively far apart. That's not that important. But she's like, I said, "Sure." She sits down. She goes, "I'm having a heart appointment too." Then she tells me about how she has a brain tumor that's pressing on her optic nerve. And so her eyesight is rapidly deteriorating. And her insurance doesn't cover, like, she has a limit to what, how many times she can get glasses or whatever. So, like, one pair every 2 years or whatever. But her eyesight is so rapidly deteriorating that she can't last long enough on one pair of glasses. And so it's like a real hard thing financially. And it just means this tumor's getting bigger and she's going to be out more money. And like, this is enormously heavy stuff. And this woman is reaching out to me to comfort me because I'm exchanging a pair of glasses and everyone's being really helpful and nice. So I didn't say that to her when she told me her sob story. I was like, "Oh, that's awful." And in my head, I was going, like, how would I even explain to her what I'm crying about? Like, how is this even a thing? But it was. And then I went into the doctor. The doctor was also very nice, although did not. She's like, "Well, I could try and look in your eyes, but it would be hard to see anything because the tears are getting away." I'm like, "Yeah, I know." Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Anyway, they exchanged them for me. They took out the thing. I freaked out at first when I first put them on and was like, kind of flipped to more irate sounding because I just didn't want to cry. So I can't see properly. I don't know. But then they're like, "Just go and take them overnight. Let us know if there's still a problem." They were completely perfect. It was wonderful. The experience was not wonderful, but that was 100% my fault. Slash my brain chemistry's fault. But the glasses themselves were lovely. Okay. And again, all that to tell you that I do not like self-assessment. It's very difficult for me. So evidence, again, more evidence that I had added to the evidence for column was that I have been learning a fair amount about inattentive type ADHD for a couple of reasons. And the more I learn, the more I relate to struggles of people that share this diagnosis. Okay. So as I read about symptoms, different struggles, I go, "Yep, okay, that makes sense. Oh yeah, I do experience that." However, I am acutely aware of Cyberchondria, perhaps more commonly known as medical student syndrome. But due to the accessibility of medical information online, the condition is no longer confined to medical students. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, it's like the frequently occurring phenomenon of a person believing that they suffer from a condition that they are in the midst of studying. So they were finding with medical students that they would study something, and then a large majority of the students thought that they had that. And then when they moved on to something else, all of a sudden, a similar number of students thought they had that, and so on and so on. So that's kind of a well-documented phenomenon. So I'm very aware of that. I know that I have a tendency to relate to things. So if I'm learning about something and at that same time kind of starting to suspect that I
might be affected by it or might have it or whatever, I get suspicious immediately. So in my case, there's been a couple of reasons why I've been learning about it. One is that I've been taking classes dealing with mental health conditions for a diploma I'm working on in addictions and community health. So throughout the course of my studies, I have been learning about inattentive type ADHD. So prior to that, I never really suspected myself of having ADHD because I'm not hyperactive. However, I have often joked about how inattentive I can be, and I have even more often been really frustrated, and frankly, I hated myself over how little control I seem to have over my own brain. So, a couple of more stories for you. I used to go to theater school, and in one of my theater school classes, we had this wonderful director who was taking us through. We had to read Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky and then adapt it to the stage as a group. So we did that, and he would do all these really wonderful exercises with us that I was terrible at. One of them is I wish I had a picture of my face of when I first learned what this exercise was, and continuously feel lucky that I wasn't the first singled out subject of this exercise, because I would have cried for sure. But anyway, he basically just chose one person from the group and asked us all to look at that person. So if it was me, which it wasn't, he would have said, everybody look at Alyssa. Actually, no, that's not true. What he said was everybody look at each other. So he hadn't singled anyone out yet. He just said, look at each other. So we did. We spent 5 minutes maybe just all looking at each other. And then he singled somebody out and said, okay, Jordy, please come sit here. So he faced Jordy. I think it was actually Jordy that he did the first one with, but it could, I could be wrong. But, so she was facing him but couldn't see anybody else in the circle. So it's as though there was a circle and she was just facing the other direction, so she couldn't see anybody anymore of the other students, but she was looking at him. And he said, tell me about, and then named another student. So tell me about Ben. Describe him to me. So then she was, this is what he's wearing. This is what his hair is looking like today. This is something different about him. This is the color of his eyes, blah, blah, blah. At that moment, when he asked her to start describing him, I'm going into panic mode. Oh my God, I would be so bad at this. Just terrible. I have no memory for this kind of thing. I just can't do it. And we continued to do that exercise. I think I have had to do it before. I was not when I knew that I was just trying to memorize stuff about people, it was probably a little bit better. Nowhere near what my classmates could do. So many of them were savants at this game, I felt like, but maybe my expectation of what a person's supposed to visually remember is just skewed. I'm not sure. But anyway, because of this game that we would play that I was terrible at, after theater school, I started kind of playing the game by myself when I was just walking somewhere. I did lots of walking to and from work, and I walked a lot of places in some of the years following theater school. And while I was walking, sometimes I would just remember that game and ask myself, what am I wearing right now? And try just not to look. What am I wearing? And I often could not tell you without looking what I was currently wearing, because I'm terrible at this game. So the very funny story is that one time I woke up, got ready for work, started walking to work, and it would take me about a half an hour to get there. And it was really early in the morning, and it was these lovely, lovely walks in downtown Edmonton. And I was walking to work and was wearing a hoodie, and I suddenly, that game popped into my head, and I was like, I don't remember what I'm wearing at all. And I thought, I don't remember getting dressed. I don't remember choosing clothes. I don't remember like anything. And so I started to think, am I just wearing like the t-shirt I slept in last night? Really, what am I wearing? So I figured I was probably wearing an old t-shirt that I slept in that would be crinkly and not look great at work. And so I was like, ugh. But for some reason, I never just checked. I think because I knew that if I checked before I got to work, then I would turn around and go back to work. I mean, go back home to change, but then I would be late for work and get in trouble and whatever. So I don't know if that was why, because it wasn't really a conscious decision, but I just never looked. I just spent the entire time trying to remember what the hell I was wearing. And I got to work. And somewhere in there, I had like lost focus on that particular thing, and I just wasn't really thinking about it. But then as soon as I went to go unzip my hoodie, I was like, oh yeah, am I just wearing a dirty t-shirt that I slept in all night? And I slowly started to undo, and I was not wearing a dirty t-shirt that I slept in all night. I was not wearing any shirt at all. So very inattention strikes again. I think I did keep like an extra shirt at my work, so I did have a shirt to put on. Because I would often spill stuff on myself, and so I just like to have a clean shirt just in case. But and then the other kind of story prompt that I've written out, kind of again along these lines, that's sort of, I think, related to inattention, is that if I get something in my head, I can't let that idea go easily. So if I just, until it's disproven. So if I get an idea in my head and I go, and I think this is the case, that idea is going to persist in my head until something comes along that I believe more than that idea. Now, that doesn't sound super related to inattention until I put it into this context. So on that I lived in the same place that I walked with no shirt on all the way to work. And it was that same walk. This one was walking home from work, and it was a really windy day. So it wasn't insanely cold, but the wind was quite biting. And it was like blustery. And so that made me feel like it was a cold feeling day. But I was wearing a scarf, and that's why I was having a lovely walk. And a woman was walking the opposite direction and walking towards me, and she started asking me to help her. But I don't think she spoke English. And so she was mostly using gestures to speak. I don't recall like hearing any English words. I don't think she was speaking in a different language either. I think she just knew that we weren't going to be able to use language to communicate. And so she was making this gesture to me, and it was evident that she needed my help with something. So I stopped and I was like, sorry, what do you need? What do you need? And the way that she was gesturing, what came into my head was, oh, she wants me to give her my scarf because she's cold. And then I thought, no, that can't be right, because strangers don't just walk up to women on the street asking them to give away their scarves. That's weird. So I don't think that's what's happening. But then she kept making the gesture, and everything that she was doing, she was mostly doing a gesture, and then sometimes would also do like other things. And every single thing that she was doing was confirming to me, no, she's definitely asking for my scarf. So we spent a few minutes of me struggling to understand her and trying to convince myself, no, like, that's ridiculous. She's not asking for your scarf. She's asking for your scarf. She's not asking for your scarf. She is probably just asking for your scarf. And then debating in my head, should I just give her my scarf? Do I want, like, I have another scarf at home and it's pretty close. Like, I'm not going to get that cold. And she's this poor old lady. Like, I should just give her my scarf. How could you be asking for your scarf? She's asking, that's definitely her scarf that she wants. You should just give it to her. Be a good person. Like, and so finally, I was like, it can't be anything else. She wants my scarf. So I took off my scarf and I offered it to her. And she laughed. like, I don't want your scarf. Like, why would you think I would be asking you for your scarf in the middle of the street, stranger? Laughed. No. Then she did the exact same gesture again. But because I was able to get out of my mind that she was trying to get my scarf, I could see very clearly that all she wanted was some help with a snap at the top of her coat, so that I could close that for her because she couldn't do it. Her hands were kind of arthritic, so she couldn't close the snap on her own, and she needed my help. So I did that. I went on my way, and I still had my scarf. But it's that sort of hyper, like, being unable to get an idea out of my head, I believe is also very kind of symptomatic of the ADHD story. Like, just being really unable to divorce that idea until she actually told me, no, you are wrong. Okay. So that's partly why when I went to my doctor to say, I think I might have ADHD, that idea was already in my head. I had been thinking about it a lot, wondering, reading, imagining what my life might be like if I could just take a pill and things would be easier. So I had kind of already convinced myself by the time I went to go talk to my doctor. So my doctor was less convinced. He said, you do screen positive, but then we spoke for a while and he said, a lot of the things you're saying don't really sound like ADHD. And my doctor is brilliant. He really knows his stuff. But he also gives me a lot of credit, like a lot of, he listens to me as his patient, kind of going, all right, well, like, you're a reasonable person. And so if you really think this, like, I'll give you my kind of opinion and we'll sort of meet in the middle somewhere. So I said, I understand why it doesn't sound like I have ADHD to you, but like a lot of the things he was saying, I didn't always 100% agree with his interpretation of them, even though he was hearing exactly what I was saying. But then he'd be like, man, what about this? And I just didn't want to sit there the whole time going, well, now I'm going to completely contradict myself according to you. Even though I just said this, because that wasn't really what I was feeling. Like, it was a really good conversation, but like, I was somewhat frustrated at the fact that like, he would say, anyway, I was still really stuck on this idea of, no, I have ADHD. And he asked me at the end, he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I really want to take the medication because I feel like it will help me answer this question. Because all I have is self-assessment that I resist at all costs. Like, the questionnaire is a self-assessment questionnaire. And I have these struggles that are often really linked to ADHD. And I would just like that struggle to be lessened. So I started taking the medication. Now, pretty quickly upon starting the medication, I noticed a pronounced difference in a couple of areas. So, evidence 4. But when I was 18, I learned something about myself, which is that I am incredibly susceptible to the placebo effect. And also because there was a lot of things that I was wanting to be magically better after starting the medication that weren't better. So that's been like, okay, is this more placebo effect? Or what's going on? So here's my story about the placebo effect. When I was 17, 18, I had really terrible, terrible stomach pain. I would end up in a merge often about the stomach pain. Usually it would hit me very, very late at night. I most often couldn't walk well when I was having the stomach pain. And I had lots of investigations done that didn't show anything concerning. And I believe that my stomach pain was psychosomatic. So something going on that wasn't like actually something wrong with my body. Like it wasn't an ulcer or appendicitis or anything like that. But there was something going on in my mind that was manifesting as the stomach pain. That's what I currently believe. I don't really have any confirmation of that. I don't suffer from these stomach pains anymore. But I kept going to the doctor and I was getting really frustrated because I believe that mental health is really valid. Mental health concerns are really valid. So it did not bother me that doctors could, like, I was pretty sure that the doctors also thought that it was psychosomatic. And that didn't bother me that they thought that. I just wanted them to help me with that problem then. You know what I mean? So, like, I was like, I feel like they think it's psychosomatic. It doesn't feel psychosomatic because what would that feel like? It doesn't feel like I've just made it up in my head. But if my head's making up, like, the brain is where you process pain. So I don't know how I would differentiate between real pain that I can't see and pain that only exists in my brain. So, and I also knew that I was quite a hypochondriac at that time. But I also know that hypochondriacs can get diseases and die. And so it was really tricky. And at one point, it was just really hard to get through the day. And so I started self-medicating. Now, a lot of 17, 18-year-olds that I know or knew will sometimes self-medicate with cannabis or alcohol or opioids, stimulants, those kinds of self-medications. I took a different approach and I decided to self-medicate with imaginary medication. So the thing that made the difference, so I didn't even take a sugar pill. I took an invisible pill out of an invisible pill bottle. I paid attention to where the pill was, like what pocket I would put it back in, what time of day that I was going to take it. There was a day that I was acting ridiculous because I forgot that I had pretended to take a medication earlier that day and then pretended to take more and then remembered the first time that I had pretended to take it. Like, sometimes when I think back on this, I'm like, what? Who was I? Like, my poor parents. So, anyway, yeah, like I felt high off of accidentally pretending to take 2 doses of medication instead of 1. I am very, very susceptible. And my stomach pain did really react to this placebo effect. of imaginary medication. So that was fun. So so that makes me feel like if I'm expecting a certain result, I will most likely get it from a medication, I guess. Now, the big thing that I noticed when I did start this medication was an effect that I didn't really anticipate. I didn't realize, I guess, that this problem that I was having had anything to do with my attention. I felt like it had to do with my daughter's level of attention. So my daughter is the light of my life. She is incredible to listen to and to watch. And she amazes me constantly since the day she was born. And that's a common story with the parents. Our kids are often able to keep our attention even if nothing else can. My daughter and I fight about certain things, and one of them is her inability to focus. So if I ask her to put on socks and then shoes and then get out the door, it takes a long time. And I start to feel like we're going to be late. And I start getting kind of grouchy, and I speak very sharply, and I have a lot of trouble with I feel so irritated. I feel so triggered. I feel like I'm possessed by this strict, sharp woman who forgot that my daughter, from start to finish of please put on your socks till she has socks on, can be the funniest dance you've ever seen. Like it should be joyous, but it wasn't to me. Less and less and less joyous. And that was the first biggest change that I saw, is I had so much patience, so much more ability to go, all right, well, she's taking a while. I'll just watch her and enjoy. It was such a gift. And I was describing it to somebody kind of going, yeah, it felt like before there was somebody on my shoulder going, better get this done or it's never going to get done. If you don't go it right now, it's never going to get done. And so waiting for other people to finish whatever they needed to do threatened this attention, this thing that I've positioned here that's invisible, that was in charge of my attention, was on my back trying to tell me, trying to fight, I guess, against my attention. And it just was a different type of anxiety than I'm used to, because usually anxiety makes me feel like crying. And this anxiety just made me feel like speaking sharply and mean and not enjoying anything and not taking a breath. Like it was just awful. And once I started taking the medication, I felt like I was allowed to, for the first time in a while, be the commander of my own attention. And that was lovely. Really lovely. It felt like a relief. Part of why, the other reason besides my school classes that I've been learning a lot about ADHD as of late, is because I think my daughter has ADHD. So it kind of makes sense that she, if I do, that she would, or that if she does, that I might, because there is a strong correlation between families of the prevalence of ADHD. So I recently was attending an information session for ADHD for kids that was saying 80% of kids with ADHD will have a parent with ADHD. I believe that was the statistic. Something was 80%. So I don't know if it's 80% of parents with ADHD will have kids that are ADHD or if that's saying the same thing. I have not yet mastered statistics, so I don't know what that means. But anyway, some sort of 80% correlation statistic. And I've been kind of trying to think about ways to help her. And I had talked to her psychologist about getting a referral to psychiatry to get her assessed. And the psychologist said, okay, like I can send that, that's no problem, but will you want to medicate her? Because they don't recommend seeing a psychiatrist about it if you're not comfortable medicating. And so I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm open to medication. And the main reason why I was at that time was because when I had started, it just felt like such a relief that I thought if she can get that relief out of it, that would be lovely. And if she doesn't, and she doesn't like it, but my life becomes a lot easier, then at least I kind of have some sort of confirmation of that diagnosis. And I'll take her off if she doesn't like to be on it. I don't want to make her be on medication that she's not finding is helpful to her, or if she feels like she's not herself anymore, because I don't want to lose her in a fog of medication. But I definitely didn't feel like I got lost in the dose of medication I was taking. I felt like I was able to step out underneath this attention dictator. So that's kind of what I was thinking when I went to see the when we spoke with the psychiatry. And he's not sure if she has ADHD or not. So both of us succeed relatively well. So she does well in school. She does get lots of feedback home about her need to work on certain focus things. But she reads well. She's generally at her grade level at most things. I think reading, she might be a bit above her grade level. She was a very early talker, whereas there is some correlation to ADHD and speech delay. So like it's not a home run for a diagnosis. But on the other hand, part of the stuff I was learning about in my classes is that girls are substantially underdiagnosed, as are children with the inattentive type ADHD, because they're not disruptive or as disruptive. She is a little disruptive, and I think that she's maybe a combination type, whereas I don't have signs of hyperactivity. She does show some signs of it. But her emotional regulation is quite good, and her behavior is generally quite good. So the psychiatrist had suggested that I attend this information session. And there, I learned a couple of things. A lot of it was review kind of for me, but I was starting to really think about it in relation to her. But something that was really cool that I learned was kind of about what the medication, like why they medicate kids with ADHD. So basically, we all learn throughout our lifetime these executive functioning skills: time management, emotional regulation, organizing, planning. All of those kinds of things are skills that we learn over time. And often people with ADHD will have some impairment in their executive functioning. So they have trouble planning, they have trouble organizing, and implementing plans. They have a lot of trouble with time management, emotional regulation, those kinds of things. And so what the medication does is it allows them to focus in order that they can start learning those skills or continue learning those skills, but in a way more similar to how a typical brain would be able to learn those skills. And that made a lot of sense to me. And they had said, some people don't have to be on the medication forever, because once they learn those skills, then even if their focus is a little bit impaired, they can fall back on the skills that they've learned and continue to succeed, and they don't always need the medication forever. And that made so much sense to me. So much so that I came up with a metaphor. So I process kind of a lot of things through the use of metaphor. I find them very impactful, very easy for me to kind of think about information if I kind of try and put it into a metaphor. So this is the one I've come up with for now for ADHD and medication. So imagine two students, both of whom are trying to learn piano, and they both have a teacher that is an expert piano player sit down with them at a piano to teach them to play. And student number one, it would be a lot like any typical piano lesson. The instructor might teach them some theory, play music for them, put her fingers over their fingers to play the music. And whenever they touch a key, they get this instant feedback right in the moment while they listen. Is that the note I was supposed to play? Student number two is sitting with the same teacher at the same piano and being taught the same lessons, but this student has a clear, hard barrier, kind of like a sneeze guard, over top of the keys of the keyboard. So they can touch and know which key they are pressing, but it is not actually pressing the key because they can't physically touch the key. There is a thin, hard barrier. So the teacher can show them which key, can put her hand over their hand and show them how to play, but they don't get that immediate feedback of hearing the note based on where their fingers go, and feeling for, what that feels like to press down on the keys and to hear that note right away. So who is going to learn how to play the piano better and quicker? Of course, it's student number one, right? So what the medication would then do, so that student is the typically functioning brain that just learns how to play the piano. They still have to work hard to learn the piano, but they don't have this extra barrier in the way. Now, student number two has been trying and not quite getting it, even though they are working as hard. It's just not translating the same way into their brain because they're not getting the same experience. And what medication does is it just temporarily lifts that barrier so that they can actually be playing and interacting and engaging with that piano keyboard with the song, with the immediate feedback of the sound and the feeling of the keys going down. And so they're sitting with the teacher, and suddenly this, even though it will take a little while to get used to it, their rate of learning those things is now much, much better. And so even if they had to put down that barrier again, they would probably do a much better job at putting their fingers in the right place. Now, when I was in the information session, they talked quite emphatically about how poor parenting does not cause ADHD, which I absolutely believe. They're not, I don't think that they're, trying to make people feel better. Like, it does not cause it. I get it. However, when I think about all of the things that did not improve when my focus improved on the medication, I think, okay, my 39-year-old brain does not learn new information the same way that a 3-year-old brain or a 7-year-old brain or a 12-year-old brain learns information. So those executive functioning skills, I've learned many of them, but the ones that I'm have some deficits in, taking the pill and lifting off that barrier does not instantly make me able to play with 2 hands and all these chords flawlessly yet. So what I need is a piano teacher. And now children, they already have a piano teacher. That's what parenting and school and all of that is about. A big part of that is being the piano teacher, teaching these executive functioning skills, and as well as lots of other types of functioning and types of intelligence. So they already have that. So sometimes all they really need is to remove the thing, and then they can really, really excel at learning. And my progress has been not what I was expecting. I was hoping for more. But then it occurred to me, because I don't have a piano teacher, I have to kind of be my own piano teacher, and that is going to take a really long time. So what I have to do is find ways to be my own piano teacher. Also, to seek out some piano teachers to just teach me the stuff that I never learned. So now I can focus on the lesson and engage with the piano in a new way. And now I just need to sit down with the teacher. And why this has become way more important to me than maybe it otherwise would be is because in many rooms, I am my daughter's piano teacher. But if I don't play the piano, it is really hard to know what she's supposed to be practicing, to set up a lesson plan, to guide her in the right direction. So I do believe that there is a genetic component. I mean, I think it's very likely that there's a genetic component to ADHD. But I think that some of those executive functioning deficits get passed generation to generation because the person teaching them might not have those skills. So it has become a very high priority for me to seek out some piano teachers, to seek out resources so that I can, YouTube a video for myself on how to do some stuff, and so that I can really support my girl in catching up to her peers on their executive functioning skills, and continuing to be the most amazing human being in the world. So whether she is gonna need medication for that, I have no idea. It will depend entirely on how that feels for her, and also on it whether or not her physician thinks it's appropriate. But what we're really going to start focusing on, her and I, is on how to build these skills concurrently. I don't have them yet to teach them to her, so we're going to learn them together and take a little group piano lesson. So I have booked in with a family therapist who I have not met yet, but hopefully with a little bit of guidance, she can kind of help us tackle this problem. So I think I'm going to kind of end it there. I have so much more in my notes, but it's been over an hour already that you guys have been with me, and I really do appreciate that. Um, and yeah, I had also just some stuff about what executive function I already have, which ones that I know are impaired, what kind of solutions have really helped me before when I've needed to do something that is kind of counter to what my level of attention would normally allow for, and how I found those kind of backdoors in. Um, I have also decided to release, because next week we have a poetry cafe, if anyone is interested. Otherwise, you'll be hearing more about more from me. This particular poetry cafe, if I can find the thing that I made for, oh, I'm in the wrong section. Will be the theme is going to be fear. I found it really scary to try and confront what is wrong with me. Not what's wrong with me, but like, what am I working with, and how can I face that head on so that I can start improving things more in my life. And that's a scary process. So this poetry cafe is going to be about fear. Also, I've been listening to a lot of fairy tales lately and been feeling very inspired by that. So I have decided that our next story slam, the September story slam for the first Thursday in September, the theme will be fairy tales. So if you feel like writing a fairy tale for that story slam, I'm really excited to hear about it. I'm also really excited to write mine. I have a metaphor idea for a fairy tale, and I'm kind of excited to see where that could maybe go. Yeah, so ultimately, this is what I have to tell you before I go. Ultimately, what I'm hoping is that, well, what I've discovered is that the three kind of things that I need to figure out in order to get something done is what's motivating me. I need time to do it, and I need clarity on what I'm doing. So everything that I have succeeded at, it's because I was incredibly clear and committed. I could find a way logistically. So I had the time to do it, and I could logistically fit it into my day. And usually that was pretty prescriptive. Same with the clarity. I find it way easier for somebody to tell me what's going to work rather than to try and make up something that might work, because then I don't have very much confidence in it. I worry that I was wrong. It's kind of that same feeling as the self-assessment. Like, I don't know if it's right. I don't know if it's right. I'll just go with it. So, yeah, that's really helpful. And then what's motivating me? So there are lots of things in my life right now that I am looking to improve. The cleanliness of my house, my food choices, and I think the way that I can schedule joy into my days with my daughter. So I'd say that those are the three big areas, but food and clean house is kind of way up there. When I don't eat well, I feel terrible, really noticeably terrible. And then I eat good and I feel great. And I don't know why I keep not eating well, because it's so much nicer to feel good. So anyway, one of the things that I'm kind of trying to work on is motivation. So I've been really enjoying my dates with my creative self. It's just been so lovely, really lovely. And because that is proving to be a really great motivator for me, I would feel even more creative if my house was clean, and I would feel even more creative if I was feeling energized throughout the day because of I'm fueling my body with foods that are good for me. So I'm going to kind of work towards that. And I'm trying to sort of figure out a way how I can use virtual variety nights to solve some of those other problems of time and clarity and motivation. So I don't know if it'll come together or if you'll just eventually get some reports on what I'm doing. I have no idea. But maybe you'll just all of a sudden be like, wow, something must have worked because, man, that girl's gotten creative. So yeah, we'll see. I have also written down a couple of other things to tell you about. One is that I don't know if you've noticed, but yeah, I think I'm gonna have to just go away for a second to show you guys this. Let me see. Oh, maybe not. Let's see if this works. Yeah. Okay. So do you see, well, I'm sure that you do, where it says StormBrain? StormBrain is written in a font, of course. And do you know what that font is called? Probably not. I don't even really love that font, but I had to use it because the name of that font is Glacial Indifference. Let me say that again. Glacial Indifference is the name of that font. I love that so much, and I really want to do some writing on that. That idea, that should be the title maybe of my poem on fear, might be Glacial Indifference. I'm not sure. I just love it. Pointing it out. Also, I have been making an ongoing list for a lot of years called Impossible Inventions and Improbable Careers. A couple weeks ago, you guys had a taste of one of the impossible inventions and what I've been doing with that. So that's called the slumber card, where instead of putting money through on a credit card, you put time basically through on a credit card. So if you like really feel like you need to be alert and awake, you put it on the credit card and then you suddenly don't need sleep and then you sleep it all off at the end of the month. That's what the play slumber card is going to be about. But that was my idea, is a sleep credit card. Also, a very impossible invention is the language book, where it's like a children's book called named after a language. So let's say it's Farsi. It's a book written in English, but if it's called Farsi, and by the time you get to the end of the book, you can suddenly speak Farsi. Just it's like some sort of coding for your brain. That, again, it's impossible. I'm not saying it's possible. It's just this idea I had. And then I had a couple of ideas of improbable careers, and I just had a new one yesterday of an improbable career idea. So my two favorite ones that I've ever had, the first one that I ever came up with was because of my lovely, lovely friend Danielle, who is the best audience member. She could be a professional audience member. We'd talk about this often, that she needs to write a book on how to be an audience member. She's amazing. I love just like showing her a film that I like and just watching her be an audience to it is one of my favorite things in the world. She's incredible. Also, with that idea, and then also kind of when American Idol and a lot of those kind of talent shows, The Voice, I don't think The Voice was even out yet when I was thinking about this, but like American Idol in particular was the big one at that time, but now there's a million of people just really wanting to be seen and have their talent be seen. So I thought a wonderful, wonderful yet improbable career would be a reverse busker, where the busker is sitting with their hat ready for donations, and you come up to the busker and just start singing to them or dancing in front of them or rapping to them or reciting poetry to them, and then they appreciate your talent, and then you give them $2 or $5 in their hat. I thought that would be lovely. My other favorite was a public bathroom fortune teller. which is someone that's like a bathroom attendant, but they provide an additional service in that they will give you a fortune telling reading based on your bathroom behavior. So if you choose the stall, like say that there's 5 stalls, if you choose the closest stall to the door versus if you choose the furthest stall to the door, if you do not have a physical disability and yet you use the accessibility stall, if you go into the bathroom, are unable to like lock the thing because it's kind of become askew, do you choose a different stall or do you still use that stall and then just hold the door from the bottom as you lean over while you're peeing? If you go into the stall and there's toilet paper in the toilet still, do you flush first and then use the toilet? Do you choose a different stall altogether, or do you just pee on somebody else's toilet paper? Like all of those kinds of things, and to use that information to tell somebody's fortune, I just think would be really ultimately kind of a good sketch idea. But I would love it. I don't know, I'd love it. But the idea I had last night was to be a boot camp coordinator who works with organizations who rely on volunteers to do physically demanding work. So when somebody's putting something on and they need a whole bunch of laborers to volunteer their time to set something up or take something down or move a bunch of things or whatever, instead of begging volunteers to please help, this coordinator would run a boot camp for people looking for a nice intense workout, and then sort of choreograph a little bit about how this, how to lift the boxes to maximize the thing, to run between whatever and make it more of a workout, charge people as kind of a fundraising opportunity to join this boot camp and get a whole bunch of work done. The reason I thought of this idea is because I was helping put fences up for the Bear Creek Folk Unfestival, which is showing this weekend in Grand Prairie. If you are in Grand Prairie and you are interested in folk music, it is going to be a wonderful event. I'm really excited to be volunteering for it. And they are actually still looking for more volunteers. So if you have some free time this weekend and want to go help out, just look them up. You can contact me if you're unable to find their contact information. Virtual variety night or at gmail.com. You can absolutely do that. But it's a lovely festival. It's going to be really COVID friendly, with masking on site, even though it's outdoors. Also some social distancing protocols and sanitizer, etc. And they're also quite green. So if you do go, just bring a water bottle with you, and there's bottle filling stations around the grounds. And that's at Muskogee Park at the amphitheater again this weekend. This weekend being August 14th and 15th. But yeah, just go check them out if you can. They're just great, and I'm really excited for the upcoming festival. So with glacial indifference, I bid you adieu. Just kidding. No indifference at all. I really, really treasure and value these Thursday nights. Thank you for joining me, and much love.
We need a theme song, so could you please send me a theme song? 'Cause we don't really have a theme song, and we could really use a theme song. Send us a song.